All right, let's quickly take a look at what I'll be showing in the demo. So the path that I'm showing today in this demo is this bottom path. We have multiple ways to do some of this stuff with Aembit alone or with Aembit and Netskope. This demo is purely an AI agent with the Netskope One AI Gateway talking to an LLM. So I'm going to just quickly talk through what you'll see. So in terms of deployment, I have an AI agent that's an AWS. The AI agent I'm using is going to be an N8N chatbot. And that traffic is going to be directed to Netskope One AI Gateway, and that's going to be doing a bunch of enforcement. At the same time, the validation and identity piece is going to be handled by Aembit. So we have Aembit in the cloud. We have Netskope One AI Gateway that I have deployed. We have the N8N agent that I've deployed. And the traffic is going to be going from the N8N node agent to Netskope One AI Gateway for inspection. And if inspection is all good, it gets then forwarded on to the LLM. The LLM I'm going to be using is Anthropic's Claude. And the part where Aembit comes in is going to be the injection. So you're going to see me doing some validation of the AI agent, and then you're going to see it also inject the credentials. So the credentials don't really need to be given. I mean, they shouldn't be given to the end user. They're all stored with Aembit and are injected as needed. So you'll see two different things get injected. There's the AI Gateway access token, and then there's the LLM access token itself. And in this demo, we have authenticated calls enabled. So only an authenticated call is enabled. So even if we pass the LLM access token, but we don't pass the AI Gateway access token, all the calls will be blocked. With that, let's go ahead and check out the demo. All right, in this demo, we're going to be looking at the integration between Aembit and Netskope. And to do that, I'm going to use N8N. And here I have a chatbot. And this chatbot has been configured to use Aembit and also to use Netskope. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple things in N8N, and then we're going to jump over to the configuration and see how this is done. Okay, so first, I'm going to just ask it a simple question. Please tell me about Netskope One AI Gateway. And it's going to reach out to Anthropic and return some information. Okay, great. So there it goes. It's telling me about Netskope One AI Gateway, and we'll talk about how that was done, but it is using an LLM, but there are things happening in the background. And then now let me ask it something else. Tell me about guns. So again, it reaches out to Anthropic. Okay, and you can see it says this activity has been blocked by your Netskope administrator. All right, now let's take a look at how this is done. All right, so this is the chatbot. And the one important thing to know about this chatbot, as I mentioned, it's going to Anthropic as the LLM. But the one thing to point out is the configuration is mostly done here by setting up a credential. So if I go to credentials, you can see here that we have this Netskope Anthropic. And all you're basically doing here is pointing the chatbot credentials to use the base URL of the Netskope One AI Gateway. And this is one that I'm hosting in AWS, and we'll take a look at that in a second. So this API key, really, it's just a filler. This is something that's mandatory in N8N, but these credentials will be injected. So we'll be injecting two different credentials, and I'll show you that in a minute. So now let's go look at the Aembit configuration before we look at the Netskope console. All right, so now I'm in the Aembit admin portal. And here, there's a few things I'm going to show you. But first, let me switch over to the Netskope One AI Gateway resource set. And resource sets are how we partition our tenants. So this one is like a tenant within a tenant type of environment. So I'm going to just talk through the policy that I'm using. And it's really this one. So there's a couple things to point out. So the agent is running in an AWS instance, and I define the resource set ID that's in the AWS instance and the AWS EC2 instant ID. But there are a few more things, other ways we can actually get super granular in how we identify the workload. But for this demo, we're going to be using that. The other part of this is the trust provider. So this is how we validate the tenant or the workload itself. So I'm using AWS metadata service, and the AWS metadata service will return information directly to Aembit. And that's how we compare what the agent proxy, which is installed on the AWS EC2 instance, is telling us. We're going to compare that identity with the identity that AWS tells us directly. And we are also, as I mentioned, the chat is using this base URL, and this base URL becomes the server workload. So here's the server workload. It's configured for HTTPS. So when we see this traffic, so traffic going from N8N trying to access the Netskope AI agent, we go and we inject some credentials. Okay, so we're going to be injecting two different API keys into the header. The first one is X API key, and this one, I'll show you the credential provider in a second. This one is basically to go to the LLM. The second one is XNS for Netskope, AIG for the AI Gateway API key, and this is so that our call gets authenticated when we go to the Netskope One AI Gateway. And I'll show you that in a second, where we're actually saying you need to have an authenticated call before the gateway does anything. So as soon as we see traffic going from the N8N agent to the Netskope Gateway, and then ultimately back to Anthropic, we'll be injecting credentials. And then here, this is the credential provider with the API key that gets injected. So we know everything's working because we saw two things happen. We saw the good prompt, the one where I'm just asking for information, that one gets handled. And then the other one where I'm asking about guns is something that we're protecting based on policy in the AI Gateway. We have guardrail policies. I'll show you that. That's what's actually blocking the call, and that's also what is saying, hey, this thing is blocked by your Netskope administrator. We'll see where you can actually customize this as well. Okay, so now let's go look at the Netskope configuration. All right, now we're in the Netskope admin portal. So let me show you a couple things here. We're going to look at policies, and we're also going to look at some other things like how the AI Gateway is deployed and so on. So first, I'm going to go to the settings. And then within settings, we're going to go to the Security Cloud platform. And here we are going to go to the AI Gateway. Okay, great. Okay, here you can see that I have an AWS demo AI Gateway deployed. It tells us how many calls it's making and so on, and how many I'm entitled to. And it also has some information that I can use later on for some custom API AI providers if I'm using Claude, Gemini, or OpenAI. As mentioned, we're using Claude Anthropic, but you can see here, this is the showing the state of my deployed AI gateway. Again, this is in AWS. The other thing to note here is authentication. So we're going to go look at authentication and token and group. And here is the token that I'm actually using. This is configured as one of the token that gets injected. And this one is doing authentication from my API calls to get into the Netskope One AI Gateway. All right, now let's go look at the policies. Okay, so there's a couple of policies configured here. I showed you one of them. I showed you this block unauthenticated. So this actually happens kind of in the background before we can even make any other calls. But what this one will do is if I don't inject the gateway credentials, it's just going to block the traffic. The user can't make any calls at all. So this is one way if you need like a kill switch. This is one thing you can do to enable that kill switch. The other one that's configured here under access control is to block file uploads. So if you really want to prevent your end users from uploading sensitive information, you can just completely do a full file upload block. The other thing we have configured is this AI guardrail, and this AI guardrail is enabled. And I'll go and I'll show you what this actually does. But you can see here that basically I have a policy for guardrails that we'll look at. And then the action when they hit this is you get that message that I showed. This activity has been blocked by your Netskope administrator. And we can see the actual guardrails here. And the one that I have really enabled is this one. I mean, there's a bunch of them on, but this is the one that I put in that prompt asking for guns, and it was triggered. So it's one about weapons, and when we see that, and when Netskope sees that, it'll block that, and it'll say, hey, this is a prompt that's been blocked by your Netskope administrator, so please don't do that again. On the Aembit side and on the Netskope side, we do have some nice logging of this information. So the logging is here under Scope IT. There are AI Gateway events, and the one that we're going to look at is this replace. This is one that got blocked a little bit ago. And this was the one that was a prompt coming from my N8N system. So it gives you a bunch of information on where it's coming from, what model was requested, a lot of information that's really useful. And it tells you which gateway it hit, tells you the policy, and so on. So you get to see the exact interaction. It gives you token group information and so on. So you can use this to get more information and maybe set off another trigger to alert admins and so on. So this is really good information on the Netskope side, and we'll go take a quick look at the logging on the Aembit side. So I'm back in the Aembit admin console. This is our logging and reporting. So here you can see information about where the call came from for the N8N access and where it's actually going. What did we go through in terms of checking the policy? So this is very high level metadata. I can also go to workload events and then get some more information about header, pass-through, and so on. So this, combined with the information and logging you get at Netskope, is pretty powerful if you have other things in your process and you want some triggers to be set off, or some more notification, or just for auditing later on. With that, I'd like to say thank you for being with us during this demo.